Right. Welcome, Cyndi. It's good to have you.
It's so good to be here, Sarah.
And we met, or I met you through Instagram. And I think that I noticed you like liking some of my posts. And then I was like, I'm curious about who this Cyndi person is. And so then I clicked on your name and went to your profile and just learned about this incredible body of work that you have. And I've been learning from you through what you post on Instagram. And I love your newsletter as well. I've been referring my clients to it too. So I'm always grateful when we can take one of those like online connections and actually meet more face to face.
Yeah, I agree. I've been such an admirer of your work and the way that you speak about doing business and the connection to spirituality. And it's so nice to be here and finally put a face to the person that I'm listening to and I'm folding laundry and running around doing errands.
Totally. So I would like to start with the first question that we ask all of our guests, which is how did you start your day today?
This morning, I woke up and I meditate. I use an app called Open, and I do it for about 20 minutes because I'll wake up, I'll wash my face, I brush my teeth, and then I immediately get back into bed with my eye mask on and I do a meditation. And I always try to have that first 20, 25 minutes of the day just to really come back to center and ground and visualize my day and the things that I'm going to do and the energy I'm going to bring into the day. And then I will do some journaling and usually a workout, like 20, 25-minute workout. And I'm ready to start writing.
Love that. So you began your career in journalism and you worked for some major networks, for some luxury magazines. And then you transition into working with entrepreneurs, those who are self-employed. I'm not sure if you're working with people beyond that, you can tell me, but through storytelling. So can you tell us about like what inspired this transition from journalism to storytelling?
Well, I've always had the storyteller in me, and that just goes way back to when I was a kid. And I brought that all throughout high school. I was in the high school newspaper. When I was in college, I majored in broadcast journalism. So instead of the college newspaper, I was on the college broadcast team. And that's how I started my career in journalism. I was a TV news producer, I was a TV reporter. And I eventually ended, it was over a decade, and I've done all sorts of things. I was a political reporter, I was a business reporter, and I ended up as the executive editor of a luxury lifestyle magazine here in New York. And the presses all but shut down when COVID hit. So back then I was thinking, oh, like this is a good time for me to start freelancing. And I had gone back to school at that time and I was at Columbia learning marketing because I'd seen so much overlap between, marketing, storytelling and storytelling for journalism and magazines. And I could see even back then how those two were coming intertwined, especially because of social media. So it was something that I was interested in pursuing. And when the pandemic hit and the job basically stopped, a lot of the brands I was working with at the magazine came to me and they were like, well, what do we do now? Like nobody's coming through our storefronts. And how do we have a better online presence? How do we tell stories online? So that's how I ended up starting a content agency, which I did not even plan on. I did not have that traditional, I'm going to start a business and here's my business plan and here's my vision and here's my brand. It was very much out of just kind of opportunity, just seeing that people needed it. And I was there and I grew a big social media following and a really wonderful content agency. I had about 3 employees at the peak and we were doing really well, but then I burnt out. So that's how I started from going from journalism to telling stories for business owners. And yeah, it's just been a beautiful evolution and honestly just something very natural, not something planned.
Well, a couple of things come to mind as you're saying that is one is as I'm hearing you say that, I'm remembering that at certain points in my life when I was younger, I used to want to be a journalist. And I was also I always wrote for the school papers in high school and college, wrote for magazines in my early 20s. And so I relate to that. I never obviously went as far as you did, but I relate to that, that passion for that kind of storytelling. The second thing I want to name is that that is super impressive. That like it seems like in just a very short amount of time from leaving the magazine to starting your own content marketing agency company with multiple employees, huge following. Like that's yeah, I guess the only word is that that's super impressive. Like were there certain, and especially that you didn't have any formal training in it, and so it just sounds like you were just following life's impulses, and you're following life in your own inner impulses to do that.
I always felt like if I was showing up and doing the work I was proud of, I would find the right people. And that's always been true. Whenever I'm doing work that is exciting to me and I'm putting out things that I'm really proud of, find the right people come into my circle. And I've always been able to trust that throughout my business. And then a portion of that too is just being a yes woman. Like people come to me and they have a problem and I see that I can help them solve their problem and I want to say yes. So, I never intended to have that content marketing agency, but so many people had come and I was like, okay, we could bring on more people to help. So that's kind of how it grew and grew and grew without that plan. I was following my intuition, knowing that we could help people and do good work. And also, I also didn't have I didn't know what to expect when I started a content agency. I never had a business before. So I was really learning on the job as I go and just trusting my heart. And I think eventually, like, learning to discern the difference between trusting my heart and saying yes to every single opportunity because of that lack mentality of like, this could all go away tomorrow. Learning to discern that has been the big journey over the last year.
Yeah, I love both of those points that you made, and one I just want to highlight for listeners because I think it's an important one for women entrepreneurs, at least the ones that I work with and what they struggle with, is that you've been focusing on just the quality of work that you're putting out, and you trust that if you feel good about what you're putting out, that the right people are going to respond to that. And so I think it's just really important to note that because sometimes we can get stuck in our heads, like, how are people going to perceive me? Or maybe don't even put the work out because of that fear of being exposed or being judged. But there's just like I sense like a self-trust in you, like knowing, yeah, if I do good work here, there will be a response. And there's that, like the reciprocity starts to open up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's been so key to it all because I can definitely get, down with like external validation and feeling pressure, and especially like as like my following grew bigger and bigger and there was expectation around what I was putting out, like people were coming for certain reasons, and like sometimes that's a little limiting as a creative because you kind of get yourself into this box and of what people expect from you, and then as you evolve creatively, it could be a little bit more scary, but I always find that like when I'm feeling like I don't want to show up on social media and social media feels hard for me, it's always because it's time to evolve creatively and start putting stuff out there. And that's a little bit scary sometimes. But I know that when I'm doing that work that lights me up, the right people are coming. And I feel like that's just a theme that happens over and over that I can continue to trust.
And then the second thing that you named was like learning to listen to your heart more and not, I think that there is a phase in our careers where it's helpful to say yes to everything just to get things in motion, to build that momentum. And then we need to come to that place of more discernment, having more clear yeses and nos. And I think that that speaks to an additional transition you went in. So you went from the luxury magazines to creating your own marketing agency, and then you went through another shift. Can you talk to us about what that next shift was for you and what led you to it?
Yeah, so I had this, like I said, I had this really great agency and I really did enjoy the work and I loved working with my employees. But I found that I was a lot in like that day to day, and I felt like my writing was kind of getting put to the back burner, which is absolutely like that's just a non-negotiable. Like my work is my work, like sharing my writing, and that's so important to me. And I felt like I've gotten very far away from that. And even though we had these wonderful clients and everything was working, I didn't want to just build this business and scale infinitely, because, a part of, not going back to corporate and not going back to those jobs is not working 80 hours a week and spending my entire life thinking about work. I got sober in 2022, and that shifted a lot of priorities for me, and my spiritual and mental well-being became so important. So about a year after I stopped drinking, I decided, it's really time to do more of what I'm called for. And I feel like that is writing brand stories, that is doing actual stories, not also not just marketing, but really telling great stories of entrepreneurs, and just telling my own stories and the things that I've gone through as an entrepreneur, and not, I feel like for a long time I played it a little safe, just kind of like teaching about storytelling instead of actually just telling my own. So it kind of felt like I was like this split person for a little while. And I felt like if I really wanted to lean into that, I would have to basically split off. Like I would be the founder, and then I would have this successful agency. And to be honest with you, that just didn't feel right for me. I feel like I work best one-on-one with people. That's why I love doing cohorts and why I love doing one-on-one sessions. I feel like that's where I get the most, like where people get the most out of it and I get the most out of it. I just love that energy exchange. So I decided, like, okay, like our biggest client had ghosted us like right at the beginning of 2023, and I was like relieved, I didn't feel like, oh, like this is a mess and what are we going to do? I wasn't scrambling. I was like, and I just took 2 months off of social media. And I decided, like, okay, it's time to just like really get this right. And we didn't like cancel everybody right away. We like came up with a plan, and as people contracts were coming up, I have a lot of friends in the industry. I was able to partner with them and move clients. And then I finally got to a place where it was just me, and I was able to do the course that I really wanted to do, and now the cohorts I really want to do. So this is still all really new to me. Like the technically the agency ended, the last client left last August. So this is still like a new phase for me as I'm feeling it out. And it's just been so rewarding. I feel like I'm finding out so much about myself during this phase. And also you know, really, again, like this is more about listening to my intuition and not saying yes to people. And like great clients seem to come in like in my inbox all the time, and I'm like, I have to have the self-restraint to be like, I can't say yes to everybody anymore if I'm really going to do the thing that's on my heart. So that's been the process right now.
And you talk about that you help people with brand stories. Okay, well, how would you define a brand story?
So a brand story is ba- like the difference between like a marketing story and like a story for like the sake of telling a story is that the marketing story is going to have a message. Like all stories have messages, but we're really honing in on the message as we tell a brand story. And most people will think like it follows this arc of like, I was really passionate about baking, but I was an investment banker. But then I decided that I love baking so much, I'm going to be a baker. And now I'm a baker. And now here's how you could bake too. And like but like that's not a story. That's a plot. Right. There's no depth there. You're just kind of telling me a sequence of events. And where I really find that most business owners struggle with is really finding those little moments where the meaning comes across so naturally that you don't have to like preach this message that or if like follow that whole like I did it and you could do it too kind of story arc that we hear so much in business. It's really about mining for the moments where you really know in your heart that like this is something meaningful, and like those are the stories we like to share. It's not just kind of this here's my origin story, here's, why I started. We get to something a little bit deeper, and that's usually the part that's going to connect you with your audience most, is really hearing those moments of like, oh, I could totally see why she's so passionate about why she's doing that. And I find it's that, like that energy that people are drawn to. Like when you're really excited about your work, I think that shines through and people want to be involved with what you're doing. So that's what I'm trying to get out when we're doing brand stories, and you know brand story from like that larger, like that zoomed out perspective, but also like the stories that we tell every day on social media. So they have like these two different things, and I kind of explain it like Christmas lights. Like if you think of the string as like the narrative, like that's like all the things that hold your brand together and your values and your point of view and why you started. And then you have like the little lights, like they're plentiful and bright, and those are like the little stories we want to share on social media and in newsletters. So like how we disseminate the large stuff into the smaller stuff is a lot about like how I work with clients, and how we really bring a brand to life and create a story in people's mind about who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
And so if a woman's listening right now and because I know that a lot of women that I work with, well, one of their biggest fears is visibility and exposure. And they're on my email newsletter. Maybe they've read my books and they know that I share a lot of personal stories, some deeply personal. And one of the things that I share that I tell them is like, you don't need to necessarily tell your personal stories. You can tell any kind of story in your marketing. And but even as women are listening to this and thinking, well, how would I come up with my brand story? Like, what are some ways that they can start to look at their own lives, present and past, to start to see what could they share that wouldn't feel like too much exposure?
So a couple of things I could share here. Like, first of all, and what I'll say is, just from my perspective, like I've always told other people's stories as a journalist and as a marketer. And one of the biggest things that I've done is like I've been in that place too, where I felt like I didn't know what personal stories to share, and I knew I should do it. Obviously, I knew I should do it, but I had such a hard time doing it for myself. So yeah, I can totally relate to that. Second thing I'll say is that, a vulnerable story is never about the bad thing that happened to you. It's only the context for the real story. And that's how you shifted inside, how something changed, like a realization, an aha moment, a place where now you've started to do things differently. So it's not about getting into the dirty details. It's not being page six. You know, I think a lot of people think in order to tell a rich story, it has to have all these like really like nitty gritty hard details. And that's not always the case, because especially in stories for marketing, we're really after the message. We're not after those little details that you think in more of an artistic kind of story. And there are ways to do it where you can feel seen, but you don't have to divulge everything. And as far as just finding stories from your everyday life, I wouldn't even look for value. Like people are always obsessed with like, how do I tell a story? But there's no value there. What are people going to get out of it? People get out of it just recognizing other people's experiences. First, people are voyeuristic, like they just are interested in other people. They just want to see what other people who are like them are up to and how they're handling life the way they do. So just being able to see themselves in your story is value enough. And you can find those little moments like learning, and this is why spirituality is so intertwined with storytelling, because you're taking the time to slow down, and you're taking the time to notice and observe. And like if you're always in your busy mind and you're go 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 all the time, it's going to be very hard to notice those little moments. But one little trick when you're starting is I'll look at things like there are a gajillion dandelions outside in the yard right now. And that reminds me of when I first bought this house, and I would pick up, like, I would used to like just hand dig out all the little dandelions because my husband wanted a really perfect lawn, but I am heavily against things like Roundup. So in order, like, I wanted him to feel proud of his lawn. So I would just go out there and just like pick all the little dandelions out so we could meet halfway. And it's those kind of things. It's like if you could look at something and if it triggers a memory, you could probably build a little story around that. And those are the things that you want to mind your memory for. And as you are like going through and learning how to tell your stories, it's a very reflective process. And, a lot of my spiritual practice comes from that reflective process as well. So that's why I always feel like it's so intertwined. But you could just tell, like, if you could look at little things that like trigger a memory for you, and you just kind of start putting them out there, don't expect anything in return. And you will likely get such a big return back. I posted a story about how I open the door for my dog like about a gajillion times a day just to let her in and out from the backyard. And I got hundreds of messages of just from people like, oh, me too, or my dog does that, or I'm the designated door opener in my family too. So you just, we think that they have to be so profound and deep to make a connection, but it's often the smallest moments that make the biggest connections.
Yeah, those are great examples, especially like the opening and closing the door for the dog. It's like I do that too. And it's like I wouldn't think of that as a story, but that is just a little micro story.
Yeah, and that's like what's great for social media, those little micro stories, because I don't ever forget when I like one thing when I first started was I was working with this copywriter. She was wonderful, and she told me like one thing that like made someone hire her over somebody else was just that she talked about her shepherds, her German shepherds, and that person just happened to love German shepherds, and that little teeny story about her, like that was it. That just like made all the difference. Someone could just relate to you a little bit more, and that's all it takes.
So I think that leads into another important question is like, why is it important to even include storytelling in our marketing?
I think it's important for a number of reasons. I mean, there's all the traditional, like when you think of like why storytelling, well, people are going to remember your message more if you throw like if you just tell people stuff, like they're just going to they're here everybody's hearing so much stuff, right? Like we don't know like what like we don't have any filter, but a story almost gives a filter of like why this matters. That's why you could say the most cliche thing through a story, but people will have an aha moment of like, oh yeah, I never thought of it that way. Because when you're hearing something through a story, you're living the story as I'm telling it. So even though my experience doesn't 100% match your experience, I'm still subconsciously looking for ways of like, I'm like that too, or that's relevant to me. So like it just draws people in so they remember a story more. And more than that, it's like how I remember people, right? Like if I think of I'm trying to think of like someone like big, like as an example. But if I think of Mel Robbins, right? Like I remember her, and she was at rock bottom. She got sober. She has the 5 second rule. Like she's the 5 second rule lady. Like that's the story. But that's something that I could immediately communicate to somebody else. Like, oh, have you ever heard of Mel Robbins? She was you know, like bankrupt and like drinking too much, and now she's like found all these ways, and you should totally check out what she's going to say. I could just like communicate that really quick to somebody to pass that information along. So it's a way to be recognized for like beyond the work that you're doing, and just like that connection and making people feel something about you. um I also think it's great because it's one of the best ways to share your perspective and learn how to share your perspective. I work with a lot of women who are really smart, and when it comes to talking about their work, they're extremely inarticulate. Like they just clam up, and I totally get that. I've been there too, and that's why I love to practice storytelling, because when you could share why something is important to share, like if you have a message and you could talk about like how you realized this was so important, and um, you know why you came to think of something a certain way, you're really learning how to articulate yourself. So yeah, it's for your audience and they're going to remember you and they're going to be able to like spread your name easier with their friends. But it's also for you. It's that process of going inside and reflecting and kind of sorting out the details and becoming more articulate in the process.
I'm also thinking about that common saying that facts tell and stories sell.
Yeah, yeah, that's totally it too. I mean, like if I say, you know, 45% of women have a hard time, articulating themselves. But then I just tell you a story about how the women like that I work with have a hard time articulating themselves, and now they can do it better through the process of learning how to tell stories. Like you're gonna remember that more rather than just some random fact. Again, we just get so much thrown at us all the time. If you could wrap it in a story, it's just our memory. We're just more inclined to remember when it's wrapped in a narrative. It's easy for us. It's almost like a mnemonic for your brain, just something easier to remember.
And we make decisions, including our buying decisions, from our emotions, not from our minds. And so stories speak more to our emotional life too.
Absolutely. When you can explain, when you could wrap your offering and in some sort of story and contextualize it for people and give them that feeling of like why this is needed and why your approach is a solution that somebody like them could really use in their own life. It's not convincing people. We're not persuading people. We're explaining to people in a way where they could really grasp on and understand and feel something and feel like we're speaking directly to them.
So I want to talk a little bit more about your particular framework. So you created the story craft framework, and it helps entrepreneurs tell meaningful, strategic stories. Can you walk us through the essence of this framework?
So really it's a two-part framework, and it is really based in self-reflection. And what like the first part is to mine your memory. And I have all sorts of little tools to help you do this. But basically what we want to do is look for these 5-second moments of where something shifted for you or how you've come to a realization. Basically mining your memory in a way where we're talking about like the feelings that are associated with your perspective and how you came up with that and like those little moments of your life that made all the difference. And then what we're doing is we're using that for the second part is to use it to help others. So whether that value is in just making someone feel seen or making their day a little bit brighter, like the dog, like in and out, or we're telling a story about an offer and we're looking to sell and we're looking to, I know for me, for you, like spiritual entrepreneurs in general, we're not looking to get every person in the door, but we are looking to get the right people in, and how, using stories to get the right people into our programs is so essential. So how do we make meaning out of that? So one is mine your memory, and two is to how do we use that to help other people. So that's the framework that I use in all my teachings, and it always comes back to that. It's basically it's also like a recovery thing, like how can you use your story to help other people?
I think that's such an important point and it kind of feeds into my next question, which I'll just paraphrase a little bit right now, was just talking about some of the common mistakes you see when it comes to storytelling online. And I say one of the mistakes that I see with some of my clients when they're starting to incorporate storytelling is they don't do that second part. They don't turn it around and see like how does this serve the person who is reading this? So it's like it might be a story about like so say that I'm including a story. It might be a story about me, but I'm not sharing the story for me. I'm sharing it for them. So it's like make it about them. And I always ask myself, like, what's in it for them?
I think that that's such a great mentality to have, because I think that story really is a service for other people. I would say if you're just beginning, like to not even worry about the second part, to just get to just mine your memory, think of good things, get that story out there, just get a practice going, just get a little practice going, even if it's 5 minutes, even if you don't post anything. But as you grow stronger in your practice and you're seeing those 5-second moments and then flipping the script and turning it around so other people can benefit, you know, sometimes it's literally as simple as being like, I learned this instead of saying that, like just kind of taking out the pronouns and being like, just give me that little nugget. Just give me the message there. You don't just take out the I learned this and because of that this. Like if you could strip it from that and you just land on this message, you'll get like a really nice, succinct one-liner. And that's often enough, like especially for the smaller kind of like little light bulb moment stories. But yeah, it's like turning it around to connect the dots. It's not, that requires a lot of self-reflection. There is a process there of like, I learned this and like, how can this apply? And you think of your audience and you're like, how could this lesson apply to them? How can I use this to explain something so they understand something clearer? And that is a part of the storytelling process about reflection. So that's definitely, you know, that's a hard one to do. It's not it doesn't come naturally for a lot of people, and it just, again, storytelling is a practice, and I really like to hammer that home. It's like, it's something that we do. It's something it becomes a part of our business. Storytelling is a part of our business, and that means we practice it. So there's that. I think a lot of storytelling, like probably the biggest storytelling mistake of all is just like too much context. Like people just like really go too long on the setup, or they think, again, like especially on social media, like they think they got to do a lot of details and it's got to be really flowery. Some, like a lot of people associate storytelling with really flowery prose, like almost like it's poetic. It doesn't have to be like that. You could kind of think of a story the way that you would tell your friend. That's going to do a lot better on social media than like trying to do like some performative type of storytelling or an artistic type of storytelling. But yeah, like overloading the context is just like way too much detail. Like nobody knows what details to cut versus what details to keep. So especially on social media where we're trying to keep it short and succinct, like that's a big problem that I work with clients. But really, like, um, I think that probably is the biggest mistake. There are like other little things like, I think using the pronouns too much. It's like people say I a lot, especially as they get to the bottom towards the message. When you can make that learning or that application more universal, that's really when your story is going to land with somebody, and you bring it home so they start to see themselves in your situation.
Yeah, I think I've heard you, or I've read you, read some of your teachings about this on Instagram. Like you can even do like a 6 or 7 sentence story on social media.
And that's usually where I recommend that people start, because like those, like, even though it seems so silly and simple, like those 7 sentence structures, like if you could get out a story like all the way through, you could do it in 7 sentences. And then, as you get better, as you're practicing your craft, like things will come to you, and you'll know, like you'll practice doing the writing and the prose and all of that kind of stuff. But if you can get that structure outline where you're not giving away too much, like giving too much detail, and you're really able to bring people from A to B and make them feel something along the way, that's really all your story needs to do. And I do a daily story every day. Like on my Instagram stories, I share a story, and some of those stories are 3 sentences. It's not about how long they are. It's about your ability to take person from A to B through an arc. And yeah, I think the more concisely you could do it, the harder it is. Like I'm about to I'm doing a story slam. It's like my first time doing it, and this is very, very much more in the artistic realm of storytelling. And those
What's a
stories,
story slam?
picture stand-up comedy night, but instead of jokes, it's storytelling.
Okay. And so
And
this is a live event that you're going to be in?
yeah, it's a live event.
Okay.
I'm actually doing it not this Saturday, but next Saturday. And that story has to be 10 minutes long. That story is so long. And talk about like finding the right details. Like that's been a challenge. I don't think I've ever told a 10-minute long story before. But on social media, we got to get really concise. And that is an art form all of its own. That is maybe like a little bit underrated when you talk to like the artist storytellers. But yeah, being able to tell a story concisely, take somebody from A to B while feeling something is not as easy as it looks, and especially when you're trying to do it in something like 3 sentences, 7 sentences.
One of the questions that I get a lot from some of my clients is, how do I keep track of all my stories? So is there like a particular way that you recommend? So when you do this mining process and you start to bring forward these stories, these little moments as well as these bigger moments, is there a way that you recommend people to kind of organize these so they can go back to them when they need them?
So I'll tell you what I do, and I learned this from Matthew Dix, and he's a really legendary storyteller. He's won a gajillion of those storytelling grand slams, I think like over 100, and he's written several books. He's one of the best in the industry, and he has this TED talk about homework for life, he calls it. And essentially, what he does is every single day, at the end of the day, he writes down a story worthy moment from the day. And he's not looking to write the whole story, but basically what you're looking for is just a little moment of the day that was something unexpected, something that made you go, huh, or aha, or I never thought of it that way. And again, like it's like even if you never tell those stories, like that's not necessarily the point. The point is to train your brain to look for stories in just in everyday life. And honestly, the way I do that is a 2 column Google sheet where I have the date on one side and I have the like maybe 2 or 3 sentences of like what that little story would be about. I just try to include things like little details, what was happening right before I had a realization or an unexpected moment, and how I was feeling after, and that's all I put down. But that I do that every day, and like I mentioned, I do a story every single day on Instagram stories. And again, that's just like my storytelling practice. Like I share it with my audience, but it's not necessarily it's just like a way for me to continue getting good at the craft. And like so just like a simple Google sheet where you could just keep track of that. And over time you like amass this really cool collection of life moments. And I've gone back to them to do my daily stories for Instagram. I've done like I plan on writing a book, and I know like I'm gonna have a lot of little anecdotes for that. I've used them for captions. Like it's really fun to go through it at the end of the month and be like, oh yeah, look at all the cool things that happened this month, or all the cool little realizations. And that's the thing too. It's just, little stuff. It doesn't like it doesn't have to be epic. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It's usually like those quieter, like, oh, like little realizations or little memories that come up that made you look at something different that have the biggest impact at the end of the day.
I love that. I have a very brief journaling practice that I do at the end of the day, that some of the women in my community will be familiar with. It's called 5 Gs and 1 J. So, like things I'm grateful for, things I did good that day, glitches, goals, and then joyful moments. And then I want to add this little like story, like those story worthy moments, and create that kind of archive. Because I feel like I love storytelling, and I feel like I'm can access them like for the bigger moments and even for like my email newsletter or something. But those smaller micro moments feels like just a skill that I want to cultivate more. So I love those examples. And I love that sharing that little story on Instagram stories. That feels like a good way, like you said, to practice just those micro moments.
Yeah, I feel like that's been so helpful. I love your journal practice. I think I might have to like now I think I'm gonna do that with I'm gonna add that to my story worthy moment because I love to do that too. I always do something like something I'm grateful for and then something I'm good at. Like I always think that that's like I did that well. I'm proud of myself. I think that that's such an important part of my practice too. So now I'm gonna do the rest of it. I think that that'll be a great way to end my day.
Cool. So I want to talk to you. I want to ask you about AI. And I know that a lot of people had mixed feelings about it. How do you feel about using AI to support you in your work? Do you use it at all? Just where do you stand with it?
When it first came out, I was really heavily against it and I just wouldn't use it at all. But I've changed my mind and I'll use it now for outlines. I've used it, especially now that they have that deep research feature. I've used it for deep research. I don't necessarily have a problem like with people using AI. I have a problem with people like outsourcing their thinking to AI because what I see a lot now is like people will get like a good idea and then they'll just shove the good idea, they'll just like put the good idea into ChatGPT and then ChatGPT will come up with this whole stuff and then it doesn't sound like you. Was it even what you were trying to say? Like people aren't sitting, again, that process of reflection gets lost there in an age where you could just kind of type in an idea and like instantly get something. But like so much of being able to tell good stories is being able to reflect and mine your life for those little moments and and give yourself those realizations because sometimes like you'll have a memory and you're like, oh yeah, like that stands out to me, and you have to do a little digging to realize like, oh, that's why it was so important, or that's what I was meant to learn from that moment. And AI really takes you out of that. But I think it's more important than ever to share your stories because, and you could see it everywhere. Like, you could tell the content that's being made with AI, and soon enough, you won't be able to tell. But I think there's really something to not losing your voice in an age where like we're always told like post more, do more, and it's very tempting to just kind of shove ideas in there and like get something publishable fast. But I think that ultimately take diminishes the connection that you're having with your audience. Like even right now, I'm going through a season where because I have that big storytelling slam coming up and I'm working on my cohort, like I do my daily stories, but I'm only posting on feed like 2 days a week. And my engagement is certainly taking a hit for that. But, and I could just go in and just pump out AI stuff just to take that. But I would rather not. Like I would rather, my audience will come again when I'm putting out that good work and I'm putting out stuff I'm proud of. I feel like I get that connection. And at the end of the day, that's way more important for me. And I think that outsourcing thinking to AI or outsourcing writing to AI, like there's a real danger in losing your voice.
And I love that you say that how you've scaled back on your posting to your feed just a couple days a week. And that was something else I wanted to ask you about. I think it was a story that you shared in your newsletter, how you you hit a point of some burnout and you really stepped back and said, well, do I really need to be posting 5 days a week or even 4 days a week? Can I just do 3 days a week and really focus on quality over quantity? And I feel like that's not a message that we hear enough. It's more like you need to post every day or multiple times a day. And that to me felt really validating because it's like, because I personally, I don't want to be on social media that much. I notice a huge difference in just my creativity, my presence of mind when I'm on it a lot versus when I'm not. So it's like just looking for ways. Yeah. How can I do some just like a few touch points that feel deeply aligned and good for me and offer value to my audience, and then just let that be enough.
I think that's so important, especially like I'm like you, Sarah, because since I'm like I don't like all that stimuli either. I was actually just talking to my mentor this morning and I was saying like if I didn't have a business, I wouldn't have social media. None of my friends in real life have social media, or if they do, they don't use it often. It's just not a huge part of my life other than my business. And I love my community so much and I love showing up for them. But at the same time, in order for me to show up well from them, that also means I'm not showing up constantly and I'm not and I feel like I've been really transparent about that and they've come to accept that from me. I mean, I know those messages are out there that we need to post 3 times a day to grow and we need to, dance on reels and do things that we're uncomfortable doing in order to grow an audience. And I've never found that to be the case. Again, I've always felt it's been about the work and putting out good things and practicing my craft. I feel like the biggest thing is that I'm just good at what I do and I get better at it every day. And like I said, like a lot of the problems that I run into with storytelling are the ones that my audience is running into, and I can help them from experience sharing their personal stories and their brand stories. And I think that that's what makes the content, even though there's not, 3 posts a day, whatever I do post, I've always have my audience is there and they're supporting me, and I think that that gives value to us both, um, because I am sensitive to social media, and I don't necessarily want it to be on it all the time. And last year when I burnt out, I just literally I told them like I'm done with social media. I took a 2 month break. I didn't get on at all for 2 months. I think I'd even like deleted the app from my phone, and that was the most I've ever been off social media since like 2010. So that was really refreshing for me. And then when I came back, I was posting 3 days a week, and then I was like, oh, I'll go back up to 4. And almost immediately I was like, no, and I went back down to 3. And I was at 3 for a really long time. At the beginning of this year, I went up to 4 posts again, and now I'm down to 2. Um, I feel like I try to have some presence. I do have a presence like daily on stories with a daily story. But at the same time, like not posting to feed, it just doesn't, there's a time where like I feel like I would have been like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna ruin my business if I do that. But having that 2 month break and then realizing that like, oh, like all these people, they still care because the quality is good, and like even if they're not in it for me, and I'm really lucky in that I have a really great community, and they care about me and the work. But I also have people who are just there for the work, and that's fine too. But as long as I'm putting out that quality work, people just seem to come back, and I have a lot of faith in that. So that's why I try not to let social media and like what other people think success looks like on social media affect me, because I don't know. I see so many people burning out, and my priority is to not burn out, because again, when I'm not in a good place, then I'm not putting out good work. And then that kind of undermines like the entire
The whole
premise
point
of
of it.
my work. Yeah.
So, and maybe you've already spoke to some elements of this, but you've built an impressive Instagram following, and I don't really like the word following, but community. What do you and engaged? Like what are some of the factors that have contributed to that? So definitely really focusing on the quality of the work that you're putting out, work that you feel good about. And are there
Yeah.
other elements?
Yeah, and I think that's like a distinction. Like I know people say like quality over quantity, but that's like I'm a perfectionist too. So if I like obsess with like, quality, this has to be perfect, perfect. Like that's not what I'm saying. I'm just feeling like work that I feel good about, like work that I'm excited to put out into the world. Like that is the standard for me. Like I know this is gonna be helpful. This helped me. Like I feel good about sharing this. And that means like if the post, like if I get 0 likes on it, I'm still happy with the post. I'm still proud of what's going out there. So that makes me feel like I'm not wasting my time. Like I used to just post stuff that like especially when I had my agency, I felt much more of a need to like hit a quota or do something to like stay visible or whatever. And I felt like, so if the post didn't do well, I would like freak out a little bit, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like whatever. But now, like if I'm putting out stuff that's good for me, like if I get 0 likes, like I'm still proud to put that out there. So that's a main tenet of it. Um, I think that's so like, yeah, like definitely quality over quantity, putting out good things. And having really relationships. Like there have been people in my community that I know their dogs' names, I know their kids' names. Like it's certainly not everybody in my community, but like anybody who's taken the time to talk to me, I'll always have a conversation back. Like you will not believe how many people will just message me and like be shocked that I answered them, because I have a big account, and they're like, nobody with a big account answers. And I'm like, oh, okay, well,
I'm
whatever.
answering.
That's how they run it. But like to me, like I genuinely want the right people, and I'm on social media, and for me, like it's not performative. Like I'm there. I plan on having this account for a really long time. I want to enjoy the people who are there. If I could have conversations with people, then I could help people better. And I don't, like I said, I don't spend a ton of time on social media, but when I'm there, like I'm in my DMs, I'm having real conversations in the comments, and I'll find that just by trying to have real conversations in the comments, you'll always get those people who are like, great posts, whatever, and there's very little that you could do to have a conversation. But, if somebody does like open up a little bit and they've taken the time to leave something meaningful, I'll try to have just a meaningful exchange back with them and try to understand like what they're all about and like why they said what they said. Like I genuinely, I've met
Can
so
you
many
can you
great
give an
people on
example
it.
of what that exchange might look like?
Yeah, like what's a good one? Oh, so like just the other day, like somebody who I never talked to before, never commented before, commented like, oh, like, but I do this. I was like, I shared some tip and she's like, but I do this. Like, how does this apply to me? And I was just able to give her like a quick example and, show her like how I would do it. And then she goes like, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." And then she like DM'd me a couple days ago and she's like, "I did it and it worked." And she was so excited about it. And now I saw that she signed up for the waitlist for my cohort. So, I feel like just having those meaningful conversations, because I know so many people like especially in my industry of like social media managers and content advisors that people don't want to give it, and business coaches and such, they're just like, no, like don't give like examples, like no, people have to pay for that. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like I think that like I want to show that I could help them, and if she never signed up for anything else again, that would have been fine. But like I genuinely I don't know, like just going the extra mile, really having a conversation with people. Because if she never signed up for anything, then I know down the line, like, okay, like if I ever talk about this topic again, I'm going to just make a little note here of like, if you're this type of person, this is how you're going to want to apply this. So, like, that conversation also made me better at my job.
Yeah, so like really leading with generosity and prioritizing relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I have to prioritize relationships because if you treat social media like a numbers game, it's going to make you sick. Like I like it made
Yeah.
like when I was like obsessed about it when I had the agency, like it was just a contributing factor to being sick. And even though I feel like I've always had like good relationships, not prioritize like, you know, not like really having the conversations. Like I would rather only show up 2 days a week and have more conversations in my DMs and show up 5 days a week and like leave people like unanswered.
And when you do your 2 posts a week, do you sit down and you do those like do you batch them and do them all at once, or what is your process behind that?
I'll tell you, it's a little chaotic right now because I have lots of things competing for my attention. But usually, when I'm coming up with social media posts or like newsletters or anything, it's almost always like when I'm driving or when I'm folding laundry or like something will come to me and then I like write the thing down on like scrap paper or in my notes app or whatever. And then I know what I'm coming back to. I would never sit down and be like, oh, okay, it's time to come up with content ideas. Like I'm trying to, because I'm mining my life for stories and like where things come up. Like I always like, I have some idea of what I'm going to do before I sit down to actually do it. And I think that that helps a lot. Um, so I'm always trying to just stay observant and like because I do a daily story every day, like I know every day that I'm going to have to come up with a story, whether that's a story from my past that I'm going to have to think about, or so I'm just like, it just kind of keeps my mind open to things. And like, even on like feed posts, like I often will tell stories, and I think that this is such an easy, low-hanging fruit for people who are interested in telling stories of being like, I was listening to a podcast the other day and Sarah said this, and it really reminded me of that. So like not only are she sharing like her interpretation of your wisdom, she's also giving you a shout out. And it's like to me, that's like a rising tides mentality of like everybody kind of wins there. And again, it's very low pressure. Like you're just kind of explaining what you learned on a podcast and how you're applying it to your life and how other people might apply it to their life too, you know? That's like a very easy way to start telling just like those little micro stories that people do get a lot of value out of, because not everybody has time to listen to all the wonderful podcasts and consume all the wonderful content, you know? So if you're consuming something really great and you become that trusted advisor that we often think about in brand storytelling, if your audience is the hero and you're the guide, like you just being able to filter information for them is such a value. And if you're already doing it anyway, listening to podcasts, or if you hear something on a TV show, so your character said something that made you think something, just those little things are like small moments that have tremendous opportunity to just be a good storytelling moment for you and your audience.
Mhm. And what is your current growing edge?
So I have so many right now because I'm just in this season of expansion and I'm excited. So first of all, you know, like just going from agency owner to solopreneur and like figuring out what that looks like has been um you know, interesting because I don't have that structure anymore, that schedule of like, oh, the employees and the clients, and like it's not quite like that anymore. So learning how to do that has been my growth edge, like what's going to be good for me, how am I nurturing myself during the day, and like really getting into this creative process, really building out my creative process and committing to my craft even more than I'm already doing is super important for me. So that's my growth edge. I'm leaning into more the artistic side of storytelling with the story slams I'm doing. And I'm also hosting my very first live cohort. I've never done a group program before, but I launched a course over the fall and it was really popular. And, you know, a couple of people asked if I would ever do anything live. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I've been spending a lot of the winter kind of like taking out the best pieces from the course and kind of translating it to something that we could practice live together and do you know, real-time writing and just real-time feedback. I find like oftentimes like that's if you're going to DIY storytelling, it just often helps just to have a mentor there. It's helped me to have a mentor. I have two mentors. I have one mentor who helps me with like the artistic side, and then one who helps me with the business side of the storytelling. So I totally get that, and I practice with them a lot as well to get better. Um, but yeah, like I feel like those are all the areas I'm growing in, but it's all about getting better at my craft and being better able to express myself and really want where I want to bring this company and like help people be more reflective so they can find those stories and articulate themselves better. So that's the direction I'm going in, and I certainly hope to incorporate a little bit more of my like post burnout productivity and like how I'm doing that from a spiritual lens. I've been talking more about my Kundalini yoga. So yeah, telling more personal stories, helping people get better at telling their stories. I feel like there's a whole bunch of new things coming up that makes this year um, scary but exciting.
And as I'm hearing you say all that, like I'm really feeling you connected to your heart. And I think that goes back to just the very first things we were talking about today is just doing things that feel like a yes in your heart. And it seems like you're absolutely doing that. So in terms of for the listeners who are going to take their next steps from here, I know we talked about doing that kind of end of the day reflection and writing, like recapping the day in your mind and seeing one of those little moments. Are you putting those onto a Google sheet? Um, any like additional next steps for a woman listening who wants to start implementing some of what we just talked about?
Yeah, I think it's like really wonderful to have that practice where you're mining every single day of observations. That's one of the best things to do if you want to start storytelling. You know, I would also say like look for your two sentence stories. Like if you're just looking like specifically like if the practice of observation is like one way of doing it. One way to do a practice for your business is like a 2 sentence story. And like by that, I mean like, okay, what's the status quo in your industry? Just write down like, what are people used to hearing? Like in mind, it's like post 3 times a day. And then say your way. And my way is I post a feed 2 times a week. And then, okay, so like there's like some contrast there. There's some juxtaposition there. So now that there's a story there, like now we could try to look for a specific example or, like how you, or like the story about why you do it that way. So there's fodder there. So looking for like those really high contrast things between like you and the way other people do things, and then your offer stacked up to like other people's offering, like what you're bringing to again, this is just a really simple practice to get better at explaining like what makes you you and like what makes you different than what's out there. I love that practice. And then, of course, I'm going to plug the newsletter because the newsletter every week, it's a 5-minute storytelling practice, and that's exactly what it's supposed to be. You get it to your inbox every week. I'll give you some prompts, or I'll give you some tips to chew on, and it's just a little way to like dedicate yourself to the practice of getting better at storytelling every week, and that's just on my website.
Yeah, I am a big fan of your newsletter. So I'll put the link to your website. You can sign up for the newsletter in the show notes.
Yeah.
And also your Instagram, where you share very generously just things that we can put into action right away. And on your website, we can also find information about your cohort-based course. Is that right?
Well, actually, it's not quite there yet, but if you are on the
Okay.
newsletter, I'm sharing it there. I'll have the sales page up next week.
Okay. And when is that happening?
It's going to be May 13th through June 3rd. And this, like I said, it's my very first round. So I'm going to cap it at 15. I'm saying 15, but I might be persuaded to 20 because there's already 100 something people on the wait list. And but the goal really is for it to be hands-on and like to get real feedback in real time. So it's intentionally small this time, but because it's popular, it's definitely going to happen again this year. There will be a second round at some point.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. I loved our conversation and I love the work that you're putting into the world. I feel like it's so important now. I'm a fan of AI, but especially like in a very increasingly AI saturated world and where there's a lot of noise in the marketplace, I feel like the work that you're bringing forward is so important for us to embrace.
Thank you, Sarah. It really means a lot. I feel the same way. I think you're doing wonderful things, and I always appreciate listening to what you have to say on your podcast every week.